Hello, welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. We are finally doing another one of these Kraken Game reactions. I apologize. Kind of got out of the habit of recording the video stuff around the Olympic break. It's also when the Kraken decided to start playing well, it seems. Another disappointing defeat for the Kraken tonight, April 7th, 2026. The second game of a back-to-back on the road for Seattle lost last night in Winnipeg. If I remember it correctly, it was a score of 6-2. They lose tonight in Minnesota by a score of 5-2. That fifth goal coming on an empty netter. Yes, 6-2 in Winnipeg last night, 5-2 tonight in Minnesota. Uh, if you based your feelings on this game on just the first period, then you probably feel good about yourself. The Kraken had a 2-1 lead going into the first intermission. Brandon Montour um, with a bomb, uh, 10:23 into that first frame. He gets that goal, his 11th of the season, with assists to Capo Caco and Jaden Schwartz. Matt Boldy ties it no less than 2 minutes later on a tip in, which isn't great. It's a bit disappointing, but less than 2 minutes after that, Adam Larson gets a goal, his sixth of the season, off a nice pass to him into the slot from Chandler Stevenson, and Lars is able to bury his sixth of the year. So you go into the first intermission, you feel good. The Kraken have a pretty good record. I believe it was 24-11-4 when they score first. Um, but you go into that first intermission, you feel good. And the second, well, the 40 minutes after that goes the opposite way. Marcus Foligno, 38 seconds into the second period, drives to the net, is able to use some chaos in front of the crease to wrist a shot in past Joey to Cord. And then, the first two, I don't really blame on Joey a whole lot. Um, that Boldy one was reviewed um, initially, I believe, because of I think it was a hand pass potentially. It was taken off the board initially. It was ruled no goal right away. Minnesota had it looked at, and they rightfully gave it to the Wild for their first goal of the night. There's the Foligno goal, which that was pretty hectic out in front of him. You shouldn't let Foligno get down into the crease like that. The Tarasenko goal, the Vladimir Tarasenko goal, 12:46 into the second intermission, Joey squeezes as he must have thought that he had the puck or felt that he had something, but the puck squeezes out behind him. He's right around the edge of the crease. The puck sitting down there in the blue paint. Vladimir Tarasenko follows the play, taps it in. Minnesota takes the lead. But they're only down by one. They're only down by one going into the third period. And you probably feel better about that. But the um, to begin that third and final frame, the Minnesota really just had Seattle hemmed into their own zone, and they capitalized. It's the former Kraken Marcus Johansson who scores just under 7 minutes in 6:49 on a wrist shot. He's left wide open back door. Um, the Wild take a two-goal lead. Seattle isn't able to get another one on the board. They're not able to score a third goal, and it's Joel Erikssonek. I don't think it's Joel. Erikssonek scores the empty netter with just under 3 minutes to play. The Kraken fall by a score of 5-2. Seattle did outchance Minnesota. Minnesota had more giveaways. Um, and the Kraken did have three power play attempts, but they failed to convert, obviously, on all three of them. Minnesota does get the one power play on a Riker Evans hooking call, but the Kraken penalty kill, despite all of its struggles throughout the course of the year, does hold tight, actually, on that one. Um, yeah, this was a. It's we're I saw a lot of folks after the Winnipeg game, even, who were saying, "All right, the season's over now." I was like, "My friend, I would have argued that we were well past that territory. The last homestand, things got more dire and more dire. You come out of the break so poorly, Um, the month of March was just so brutal for you, right? You come out of the break and you lose the games to Dallas and St. Louis in the back-to-back right out the gate, right? Not good. But that next homestand, the end of the month of February the 28th, you beat Vancouver up. You do what you should against the worst team in the league. You grind out that tight game against Carolina. You start to feel like maybe you're picking up something, right? Then you lose that tight one to St. Louis on home ice. That's bad. You get humiliated by Ottawa on home ice, 7-4. That's bad. You lose a tight one to Nashville at home. So that's two teams that were effectively out of the playoff race. They got back into it with the help of beating you on your home ice. Then you lose 5-1 to Colorado. It's Colorado. Um, you go on the road. You have this weekend back to back. You beat up on Vancouver again. You beat up on a banged up Florida team. You lose pretty ugly to Tampa Bay. You lose by 2 goals to Nashville. You lose by three to Columbus. You almost come back and beat Florida on the road. You have that miraculous comeback, but you lose in the shootout, which the shootout struggles continue. Obviously, there are a lot of folks who are not happy with that. You win in overtime on the road against Tampa, which is kind of funky. You lose in the shootout to Buffalo. So you've got that 3 point stretch 3 games, sorry, all 3 game point stretch where you think, oh, maybe there's some life here. You get shut out on the road in Edmonton. That's not great. Things are already kind of looking dire. You play Utah in a big game because Utah's obviously the top wild card in the West. You lose, you get, you know, rubbed by them. You lose to Chicago. And now, if we go to the standings, I am scared to look at this. Yes, Chicago's one of the two teams already eliminated in the Western Conference, a bad Western Conference. We go to the league standings here. Yeah, they are the second worst team points wise in the NHL. And you lost to them on home ice with your season, hurtling to an end. That's bad. That's really bad. And then there's this road back to back where you play a Winnipeg team that has surged like a jet into that kind of playoff territory, and this Minnesota Wild team that's already one of the teams that's already clinched a playoff spot. One of the teams that's already got 100 points in that loaded Central Division. Um, it is brutal to look at the Central and see 300-point teams. Um, you know, but just kind of the way that the losses have gone, right? At this point, with 5 games left, you've got this final homestand of Vegas, Calgary, LA to close things out, and then a road back to back of Vegas, Colorado to finish the year off. You know, since March went the way that it did, excuse me, you're better off losing and getting a better draft pick. That's just kind of how it is. Winning at this point does nothing for you. You're not going to get back into the playoff picture. It's too late. St. Louis, Winnipeg, San Jose, Nashville have all passed you for that. You've had critical key head-to-head matchups against those teams. You've lost those games, obviously, as I just mentioned. Um, it's you got to go for the higher draft pick at this point. There are only 4 teams in front of you um, to go lower than in terms of taking. You're not going to get past Vancouver. The Canucks are terrible. They have 52 points. The next closest team, Chicago, that you lost to, has 70 points. You have 75. New York just tied you in points, or they are tied with you in points. You have a game in hand, though. Um, you have Calgary, who's 2 points behind you. You play Calgary this weekend, and Chicago's 5 points behind you, so probably not. Um, you know, it's so yeah, you're better off getting a higher draft pick at this point. The highest you've picked since what the inaugural season was 4. So last year you've picked it 8, I think, the last 2 years. So you want to improve that and get it better. It is just disappointing, and there are a lot of folks who are upset. There are folks, who want to be a little bit more positive about things, and that's fine. I totally understand that. I've said that on our Keeping Up with the Seattle Kraken podcast that it's good to enjoy the wins and the good moments with this franchise because it's a young franchise and they probably won't be really competing and contending for a Stanley Cup for a decent amount of time, especially with how the current trajectory of the franchise is going. But I totally understand that. I also understand the people who are just super negative and frustrated to an extent, right? Um, it's there are a lot of folks who pay good money, invest a lot of their, personal time into this franchise, and they would like to see some wins. I don't think they expect a Stanley Cup every year, as much as that would be nice. But they would like to at least win, see a clear vision of the franchise for the future, right? Have some clear idea of what this identity will be for this team, and they really haven't gotten that. I've said it on our Kraken shows, I've said it before continuously that I think you need a roster overhaul. You need to move some pieces out. You need it's just not working. It hasn't worked the last few years. You're on your third head coach in 3 years. I don't think it's the head coach. I'm not saying that the head coaches that they've had here in Seattle are the best of the best. That's not going to happen. I saw someone say, "Oh, I really wanted Pete DeBoer." DeBoer's not going to come here. I would, I don't know if I'd say I'd love it just because of how he treats some of his players, but is obviously a very good coach. He's coached some really good teams. He'd be better than what we've got here in Seattle. Zamora wanted to go to contender. He wasn't coming here. You've got Jaden Schwartz, who was UFA that they didn't. People are going to say, "Oh, why didn't they move the UFAs?" They thought they were going to make the playoffs. By the time the deadline came around, they were, still in it. At the Olympic break, they were still in it. You know, they were if they were anywhere near it they were going to go for the playoffs. They weren't going to sell off like that. You kind of started to see that as we got to that point. It's very well was within their control. They really could have been in a spot right here. The top team. Wow, Edmonton has passed Anaheim for the top team in the West, the Pacific currently. Sorry, at 87 points. You know, um, Los Angeles is in the second wild card with 83 points. You really could be here. You could control your own destiny. You played several of the teams that have passed you up in the Western Conference wildcard race, as I've mentioned. Um, you certainly could be here. But I think, what we've seen is this group, these players, this player roster as a whole is not made for this. They cannot handle it. I use the meme, if you know the meme, the lights are too bright. The lights were too bright for this group. You have to throw out the second year because it's totally different. The shooting percentage was different. And a lot of other things go their way. This team doesn't have it anymore. James Schwartz is going to be a UFA. You got several guys locked into contract. I will be interested to see what Jason Bottrill does, General Manager Jason Bottrill does. Um, we've heard since became the general manager of this team that he wants to make a big swing. They didn't do anything at the deadline besides making that move right up against the deadline itself for Bobby McMahon, which I think is a good move. I think you have to re-sign him. Um, Free agent class isn't great this upcoming year, so I would just, you got to look at what he wants. I don't think it'll be too crazy, but he's obviously got some good upside. He skates well. He's fast. He's got size. Would be happy to bring him back. And then you kind of look at some of the other guys who, either, hmm, I don't know. I'd be interested to see what they do here. There shouldn't be a lot of untouchables with this roster. Um, depending on the asking price, depending on who you're getting in return. So, um, it will be really interesting to see what the team will look like when we get to training camp next year. But I would really hope that the tailspin that the Kraken have been in since the Olympic break means that there will be changes because we've seen largely the same group um, since the inaugural season, since year two, be run back. They run it back, and since year two, which again is an outlier, hasn't worked out, right? They've had some changes here and there. Um, Andre Burakovsky's come and gone. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare was here. Mikey Eyssimont was here very briefly. Now you've got Kako, you've got Bobby McMahon. Um, you know, I just don't think that the original Kraken group is going to hold up anymore. They're obviously not going to make it work. Lane Lambert's defensive system got them to a point where they were in the playoffs, and the Olympic break came, and then it just all went away. Structure doesn't look like it's there. They can't really overturn goals, which is fine. I understand that people are upset with the officiating going the other way. Like there was the goal tonight from Jaden Schwartz that got overturned because of a goaltender interference call on Freddie Gaudreau. You know, I believe I will look at this actually. Curtis Isaki with Sound of Hockey. I believe he mentioned this. If we go here, oh no, wrong one. I think it's John Barr. Oops, mentioned that. Yes, this one, the one that I just mentioned, was the fifth successful coaches challenge for goaltender interference against the Kraken this season. That's the most against any team this season. That's not great. Um, but at the same time, you have to be able to overcome some of these things. You're gonna have to overcome obstacles. Yeah. I just don't think that this leadership group, this, the large majority of this franchise is getting it done anymore. They really didn't get it done that well, you know, to begin with. Like, look at the second season, there was a really high shooting percentage that wasn't sustainable. At the time, General Manager Ron Francis to say, "Hey, we're gonna, add to this group so that we can get over the hump." They were a few minutes away from the Western Conference Final against Vegas, um, and they're, adding to that group at the time looked like signing Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. It's a great person, but he's a four-line center. Kyler Yamamoto, depth winger, um, and Brian Dumoulin, who you traded not too shortly after. Um, you know, I just don't think it's working anymore. And it hasn't worked for a while. We said that on our Kraken shows and our Kraken stuff. Um, so, you know, it's uh, it's just unfortunate. So things are obviously tense. Speaking of tense, I will show you Lane Lambert's entire post-game press conference because you can just kind of feel how the frustration has built and mounted to this point in time.
Lane, the way your team's been scuffling, how much does that disallowed goal make a difference just as far as just overall mindset to the team because they seem to be playing fairly well up until then.
Yeah, I mean, we played really. Hey, I sit here and it's another loss, and it's a 5-2 loss, and another empty net goal against, and I sit here and I say I thought we played a pretty good hockey game, and it's like really, you do. Another loss, but I do actually think we played pretty good tonight. We outchanced them, and we just can't get out of our own way. We make mistakes that are inexcusable, and it's, the disallowed goals that we're getting take momentum away from us, especially when we're fragile. So I mean, we want our guys going to the net. Freddie does a good job going to the net. We make a good play, but regardless of that, we can't turn the puck over at the start of the second period. We have a protocol on that rush. There's no way that guy should be alone in front of the net. The fourth goal, Marcus Johansson standing off to the backside by himself. It's things that have to change, and there will be a lot of soul searching.
Why do you think those mistakes have happened? Is it just something, do you think it's like a fatigue thing, like a mental fatigue thing? Is it, like a skill thing? Like, what do you kind of point to there?
I'm going to pass on that question.
What you make out of Joey after coming in last night midway and having to go back in there again tonight?
Well, I thought he was okay. I didn't like the goal where they poked it in. He didn't know where the puck was, but I thought he played pretty well. He made some good saves for us. He did what he had to do. Others around him have to do what they have to do defensively. And we've got to put the puck in the net. We have 2-on-1s we don't execute on. We have power play where we're passing in guys' feet. It's not acceptable.
It's obvious that there's frustration because, I mean, you were in a playoff spot. You did control your own destiny. You did have a path to the playoffs well within reach, within your control. You weren't going to need a bunch of results to go your way. You just needed to take care of the business that was in front of you, and this team couldn't do that. So, um, I will insert this clip of Brandon Montour talking about, essentially what the group needs to do the rest of the way. But at the end of the day, what I think is best for this franchise going forward is hopefully this team is able to stumble down a few more spots in the league standing so that they can get a higher draft pick.
What do you guys have to do the last 5 games of the year, just as a team? What's a realistic goal?
Obviously you can't give up. Fight for each other, enjoy. Obviously we still have some tough teams to play here. Show some confidence, and you don't want to give up until the end. So we got to show some fight. And obviously the mental stuff has to be cleaned up. It's just too easy. I'm not saying we're giving up at all. We're fighting. Obviously you showed that, but silly mistakes, mental mistakes that hurt us every night, and hopefully we can, this last 5 we can clean that up.